In 1942, during the Nazi attack on the Soviet city of Stalingrad, the greatest sniper in the Soviet Union emerged. Today you will know its history. Vasily Grigorievich Zaitsev was born on March 23, 1915, in the small village of Yelenica, in the Russian countryside. According to the memoirs left by Vasily Zaitsev, his history as a marksman began in his childhood, under the influence of his grandfather, Andrei, who was an experienced hunter. His grandfather introduced him to the art of blending in with nature, sneaking up on prey and bringing it down. At the age of 12, Zaitsev was given a hunting rifle by his grandfather. Back then, Russian children weren't even allowed to touch weapons like that, and the episode marked Zaitsev's departure from childhood. This took place in 1927 in the region on the banks of the Saramsakal River in the southern Ural agricultural district. This learning would be very important for Zaitsev during his participation in the Second World War. Zaitsev became a hunter. His father, who had fought in World War I, advised him to use every ammunition wisely and never waste a shot. His grandfather also taught him the knowledge and love of taiga, the biome of his home region, and how to listen to nature, how to blend in with it. In 1937, Zaitsev was called up to serve the motherland. Despite his small stature, he was assigned to the Pacific Fleet in Vladivostok, where he served for 5 years. In his memoirs, Zaitsev recorded his pride in wearing the telnyashika, the blue and white striped t-shirt that was a hallmark of the Soviet Navy's uniform. In September 1942, his military career underwent a significant change when he, and part of his colleagues in the Soviet Navy, were transferred to the 248th Infantry Division. At that time, he had the rank of non-commissioned officer. The Second World War had already been going on for a year, and Germany had started the invasion of the Soviet Union through Operation Barbarossa on June 22, 1941. Right at the beginning of the invasion, the German army surrounded Stalingrad, starting the bloody fighting for the conquest of that city on July 17, 1942. Zaitsev followed by train, with the others summoned, crossing Russia from east to west. His destination was Stalingrad. He and his fellow Marines were assigned to the 2nd Battalion of the 1047th Regiment, which was located near Stalingrad but on the other side of the Volga River. Still on the outskirts of Stalingrad, within sight of binoculars, the Zaitsev Battalion trained intensively for 3 days for urban combat. During this period, Zaitsev and his companions received army uniforms, but maintained the use of their telnyashika. Meanwhile, in the distance but in plain sight, Stalingrad was being relentlessly bombarded by German artillery and air force. On the night of September 22, 1942, the Zaitsev Battalion managed to cross the Volga River in one of the available boats, pulled by a small tug, reaching its left bank. At the start of the fighting, the Germans had immense superiority in artillery and aerial bombardment. To compensate for this disadvantage, the Russians sought to place their battlefront as close as possible to the German front, so that there was a risk that German troops would also be hit by their own artillery or aerial bombardments. This sought to reduce the Germans' use of artillery and aerial bombardment, thus diminishing their advantage. After the initial fighting, the Zaitsev Battalion occupied part of the ruins of a large metallurgical factory, not far from the Volga River. However, the factory was not free of German troops, and the Russians began the process of neutralizing them. By the end of the first night, the sector of the factory where Zaitsev was located was completely in Soviet hands. However, there were Germans in other sectors of the factory. Fighting continued over the next few weeks, with parts of the factory changing hands several times. From 16 to October 21, the Germans attacked the factory with bombing raids, artillery, armor and infantry. It seemed that the Germans wanted to push the Soviets to the other side of the Volga at any cost. It was around the 16th, at a calmer moment in the combats, that Zaitsev began its activity as a sniper. That day he was sitting with some comrades at the bottom of a crater. The Russian troops were unable to move, as their position was receiving fire from a German machine gun positioned 600 meters from the Russians. The commander of Zaitsev located the German machine gun through a trench periscope, which allowed him to observe outside the trench without exposing his head. Then he passed the periscope to Zaitsev and showed him where the German machine gun was. Zaitsev raised his rifle and, hardly taking aim, fired, eliminating the German shooter. He was replaced by two other Germans, who were also shot down by Zaitsev. Each of the Germans was eliminated by a single shot, as his father had taught him, so that he would never waste shots. The armament used by Zaitsev was the standard Soviet infantry rifle, the Mosin-Nagant, but without the sniper scope. The Russian General Chukov watched the combat and was impressed. He wanted to know who the shooter was. Then he ordered Zaitsev to be given a sniper rifle with suitable aiming apparatus and ordered Zaitsev to increase the count of Germans killed from those 3 Germans eliminated. Zaitsev received a new rifle. However, Zaitsev was still not seen as a real sniper. That would soon change. After 48 hours of attacks against the factory, the Germans focused their efforts against the sector where the Zaitsev battalion was located. Nearby, Mamayev Kurgan Hill was used by German observers to fire at will on the Russians. Each company in the Zaitsev battalion had been reduced to about 20 men. During the confusion of combat, Zaitsev was wounded in the back by a bayonet blow. Unconscious, Zaitsev was taken to his battalion's medical station. The Russians appeared to be retreating. Zaitsev recovered and continued the fight. At one point, he found himself in a construction site, along with many of his units wounded. A German heavy machine gun was firing into the building and causing even more injuries. Zaitsev took position behind a pile of boards and saw the German shooter about 600 meters away. Looking through the scope of his rifle, he could see the shooter's face. 3 shots were enough to eliminate the German shooter and his 2 assistants. With the machine gun threat gone, the Zaitsev battalion came back to life. Ammunition carriers, couriers and soldiers quickly returned to action. Everyone realized the importance of the sniper for the survival of the troop. It was from that moment on that Zaitsev was recognized, in fact, as an important sniper. Over the next few days, Zaitsev continued the fighting, shooting down officers, machine gunners, and other targets of importance. The Zaitsev division received orders to retake Mamayev Kurgan Hill. The Germans had begun to use light machine guns, which were highly mobile, had a high rate of fire and were very accurate at long distances. Additionally, the gunners on these mobile machine guns were coordinated by radio, allowing multiple machine guns to quickly change position and concentrate fire on Russian troops. They could appear and disappear without warning, becoming a major threat. This made retaking Mamayev Hill a major challenge for the Soviets. It was in this context that Zaitsev came across his battalion's political commissar, Yablokin. "Zaitsev, you must eliminate those light machine guns," said the commissioner. "How can I do this alone?" replied Zaitsev. The commissioner replied, "Alone? It won't be alone. Pick some soldiers from your unit and start training them to take out those machine guns." At that moment, a school of marksmen began on the battlefield itself, under the responsibility of Zaitsev. From then on, it was possible to create sniper groups to act in favor of the Soviet troops in Stalingrad. Soviet newspapers began to publish Zaitsev's exploits at Stalingrad, and this caught the attention of the Germans. To eliminate the threat that Zaitsev represented, the German army decided to send its best sniper, Major Konings, responsible for the German army sniper school near Berlin, to Stalingrad. According to the memoirs of Zaitsev, this was confirmed by a German prisoner of war in Stalingrad. Zaitsev decided to divide the process of locating the German sniper into two phases. The first phase would be to understand how he defended himself. What resources did he use to stay protected on the battlefield? He would also seek to understand how his Russian colleagues had been slaughtered by him. Draw diagrams to locate where the German sniper was. Understand where he was hiding. The second phase would be the search for the German. For a period that seemed interminable to Zaitsev, the German sniper managed to remain undetected and eliminate Russian soldiers. Two Zaitsev snipers were hit on the same day, one of them having received a shot in the scope of his rifle. From the skill of the enemy, it could only be Konings. Zaitsev and Kulikov, one of his snipers, went to the places where the two Soviet snipers had been hit. They realized that there was nothing new on that front, but they remained in position, watching. As the day ended, a helmet appeared, moving slowly through the trenches. Zaitsev concluded that it was a trap, as the movement of the helmet did not seem natural. The helmet was certainly being carried by Konings' adjutant, who was waiting for the Russian shot to locate his position and shoot down the enemy sniper. Zaitsev and his aide remained motionless. The day was over. Another day of observation passed, without Zaitsev locating Konings. On the third day, political commissar Danilov decided to accompany Zaitsev and Kulikov. The morning lightened and, little by little, the enemy positions became more visible. Suddenly Danilov shouted, "There he is! I can point to you!" and rose about half a second above the trench. It was enough for the German sniper to fire once and wound Danilov. Zaitsev was unable to locate the German. He kept watch on that front for several days, but the German seemed to have disappeared. Zaitsev kept diagrams of what was in that area in front of him, but nothing new emerged. Zaitsev noticed that, in front of him, close to the Germans, there was a destroyed tank on the left and a pillbox on the right. He concluded that an experienced marksman would be neither in the tank nor in the pillbox, which had its small windows covered. Between the tank and the pillbox, Zaitsev noticed an iron plate, next to a pile of broken bricks. The sign and bricks were there from the start, but they could represent a good position as it was safe and unsuspicious. Zaitsev decided to test his hunch. Lifted a glove, with the help of a board. Immediately, a shot hit the glove. Zaitsev lowered it and left the board facing in the direction of the shot. He saw that the hole left by the trio was a perfect circle, showing that the shot had entered perpendicular to the board. Having located the enemy, Zaitsev decided to wait for a good opportunity. After a freezing night, Zaitsev and his assistant decided to wait for the morning sunlight to change position. Afternoon, they were in the shade, with no risk of glare in their spyglasses. The sunlight now fell exactly on the position of the German sniper. Something glinted on the edge of the metal plate. Was it a piece of glass or the German rifle's scope? Kulikov decided to raise his helmet slowly over the trench. The German fired. Kulikov got up, screaming, and dropped into the trench, pretending to have been hit. The German, possibly believing he had eliminated the famous Russian sniper, couldn't resist, and decided to look over the metal plate. As his head appeared, Zaitsev fired. It was the end of the duel between the two expert shooters. Zaitsev continued to defend Stalingrad against the Germans. He was wounded, recovered, and returned to combat. Zaitsev reports having shot down 242 Germans in Stalingrad, including over 10 snipers. On February 22, 1943, Zaitsev was awarded the Hero of the Soviet Union Medal. He passed away on December 15, 1991 in Kiev, Ukraine. On January 31, 2006, his remains were transferred, with full military honors, to the Stalingrad Battle Memorial on Mamayev Kurgan Hill in present-day Volgograd, the current name of former Stalingrad. If you like this video, don't forget to press the like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and write down your comments. Share it with your friends. This is very important for the growth of the channel and to produce more videos about world military history. See you in the next video. Goodbye.